My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning, and welcome to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. Today I'm gonna read a story about one of the residents in the greater Hartford area. Remember we had Susan Carey, remember this book? Susan Carey came and I interviewed her, and she's from Grace Church, and she wrote about the lives of some of the people that come to their Friday night dinner. And they have been doing it for, 15 years or so, but it kind of weaned off during COVID. And she decided, or a group of them decided, I'm not really getting the story right, but she wrote about the people who came to dinner on Friday night and some of their stories and some of their struggles. So every once in a while, we're going to read one of those stories from Susan's book. So to this one, the first one that I'm going to read, it's entitled "Honoring the Struggle," and she writes sort of a foreword before we get into the story. Let's face it, we all know struggle. When we are dealing with a problem, paying a bill, holding on to a job, providing for a loved one, facing a health issue, the effort we put into it is our struggle. At the center of struggle is purpose. It is the fuel that drives our will to prevail, even when the odds seem stacked against us. When we lose our sense of purpose, the will to struggle fades. The pain, the loss, and effort that we could bear because of our purpose turns to suffering when it is no longer connected to what gives our life meaning. I think I never really thought of it that way, but when there's no purpose and you're struggling, it does turn to kind of sadness and with no purpose, and that really hurts. But you remember the times when you had a purpose for doing something. So the struggle and the pain of it wasn't so bad. Bad, but was worth it. Sometimes struggle is judged as failure, or if we didn't do our best or try hard enough. We should have seen it coming and been prepared. How many times has someone said, "You brought it on yourself," as if we could remove the obstacles or at least reduce their power over us. We live in a litigious culture that expects there is someone to blame. That someone is at fault, even if it's ourselves. I know that's doing my best. Changes from day to day, depending on whether I've had enough sleep, my children are okay, and other factors that affect my sense of well-being. At the heart of the story that follows and of diners throughout the book is the longing for connection that defines their struggle. They want to matter to the people who matter to them. They want to be significant because it gives meaning to their lives. James is a tall black man. He was born in 1959 in Jamaica and lived there until he came to Connecticut in 2016. In 2018, he started attending the Friday gathering. James and I didn't begin to know each other until our paths crossed at a recycling center at the grocery store. My grandchildren and I were sorting cans and bottles to redeem the nickel deposit when James walked in. "Hello, James," I called out. "Do you remember me from the Friday gatherings? Come, meet my grandchildren." On Friday at Grace, James usually arrived about 6 p.m., missing the announcements and blessings. His entrance was notable. He appeared as others were beginning to leave. I learned his name and that he rode a bike to Grace. He was courteous to the volunteers and efficiently settled in. He put his backpack and jacket on a chair at an empty table, filled his plate, and sat alone to eat. When he was finished, he brought his plate and utensils to the dishwasher, packed up a loaf of bread and leftovers, and went home. James recognized me at the grocery store. We hugged each other hello, like old friends. I introduced him to my grandchildren, and then we returned our attention to recycling. I noticed that James was pushing a grocery cart piled high with large plastic bags filled with cans and bottles. "Did you drink all this?" I asked, pointing to the bags of containers. "No," he said, laughing. "I collect them when I'm not at work. I go looking for them." That short conversation was just the spark I needed to see James as more than a Friday gathering diner. The following week, I sat down at the dinner table with him, and he began to tell me about himself. He spoke in a soft, unhurried voice. My mother had 9 children, and I was the second born. As a child, I saw my mother struggle. There was no fooling around with her. She was a serious person. She had all those children younger than me to take care of, so my grandfather raised me. When I was 9 years old, my mother sent me away to live with him. His name was James. He was a farmer. He continued, and we lived off the land. As a child, I felt like we lived in the middle of a forest. My grandfather told me not to wander too far away because there were wild animals in the woods. I think he meant birds. He said if I got hurt, no one would find me. It was scary. In the mornings, the wet dew on my feet made me cold and my feet cramped. There was no life in them. We didn't wear shoes. The clay soil and wet ground would have destroyed them. I remember those days. We lived far away from other people, too far away for people to go to school. If I heard a motor like an automobile, I came running to the front of the house. We didn't have paved roads like here. It was unusual to have a visit, so the sound of a motor attracted attention. Living with my grandfather is how I learned to fend for myself. It was a lonely time. My grandfather was a good cook, James said, and he taught me to cook. He said, "Come here, boy. Watch me." And he was very strict. Things had to be done his way, and he didn't permit me to try it myself. I learned by watching and paying close attention to everything he did. He was particular about a lot of things and skeptical of people in general. I dreamed of being an air pilot, James said. I saw planes fly over and I dreamed about where they were going. I wanted to go someplace too. I dreamed of Africa, the land of my ancestor. I wanted to see what the real Africa is like. I had a big imagination about life in faraway lands. When I came to Connecticut, it was my first time on a plane. Getting through the airport, so many people in one place, the chaos. When I was a child, I didn't know that planes crash and people die. I don't dream of being on an airplane anymore. I dreamt I'd have 100 sons and that they would spread my name around the world. I love children. To make his point, James laughed and said, "I love babies and babies love me." "I'm serious," he insisted. "If a baby is crying or fussy, I hold that baby in my arms and they settle down. It's so precious to feel a baby relax into your arms." But I saw the poverty that so many babies put on my mother. God gave me 3 beautiful daughters, and they have given me grandchildren. They make me very happy. I came to the United States to be closer to my middle daughter. I have a sister in Georgia, an auntie in New York, and my middle daughter in North Carolina. When she was about 9 months old, I had to leave her and go to Kingston to get work. My daughter's mother moved to the United States to make a better life for us. We were supposed to join her here and get married, but she married an American man instead. My daughter stayed with her grandmother in Jamaica until she was 12 or 13 years old. Her mother brought her to the United States and divided her against me. I haven't seen my daughter once since I got here. I want to know my daughter and my grandchildren, and I want them to know me. When I arrived in Connecticut, said James, I cried for 3 months straight. I was so far away from home. Nothing was familiar. I was so homesick. My daughter sponsored my immigration, but when I got here, she wouldn't permit me to live with her. I had a friend from Jamaica in Hartford. He put me up until I could afford to live on my own. That's how I came to be in Hartford. I registered for work with a temp agency, and I took whatever job they offered me. In Jamaica, I had experience with plumbing, landscaping, and working with concrete. The temporary agency got me a job as a maintenance worker at an apartment building for seniors in Newington. I took 3 buses and walked another half-mile to get there. I've had lots of jobs. I've worked at a warehouse. I packed barrels with dry goods, sardines, dried milk, rice, and flour that families shipped to their relatives in the West Indies and Africa. I filled in at the Mr. Sparkle car wash when their workers called out. The boss at the temp agency saw that I was good with my hands, that I could fix anything, and sent me on jobs no one else would do. I'm going to stop there for a commercial, but while the commercial's on, maybe you know James. Maybe you recognize this story. I don't know if James is his actual name, but think about it. Who is James? And we'll be right back with Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner.
We all know smoking is harmful, right? But did you know that even after the smoke clears, the danger remains? This is called third-hand smoke. Third-hand smoke is the toxic residue left behind on surfaces like furniture, walls, or even clothes. These harmful chemicals can linger for days, weeks, or even months. Young children and pets are especially vulnerable. They can ingest these toxins simply by touching contaminated surfaces and then putting their hands or toys in their mouth. The best way to protect your loved ones? Make your home and car completely smoke-free. Remember, it's not just about the smoke you see, but the unseen toxins we leave behind. Protect your family from third-hand smoke. Choose a smoke-free environment.
Hola, mi nombre es Rosy Alcántara. Estoy muy contenta de haber participado porque es una linda organización y muy aparte los maestros también nos dan mucha enseñanza, nos ayudan a avanzar, a tener más información sobre los niños, sobre las escuelas, es muy importante. Invito a todos a también participar, a seguir los cursos, a seguir avanzando para poder lograr nuestras metas, porque nosotros somos inmigrantes y queremos seguir avanzando y apoyar a nuestros compatriotas. Gracias y que sigan los proyectos y avanzar juntos. Gracias.
Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. We're telling the story of James, and the title, and there are several stories under this title, is Honoring the Struggle. And we left off where James had a job at a temporary agency that sent him out to do different things, and he was very skilled. And actually, I have never met, of course, I'm sure there are some, but I have never met a West Indian man that couldn't cook. Boy, I love their cooking. Never met a West Indian man who couldn't cook or who didn't have skills. And James has skills in plumbing, landscaping, and working with concrete. So that's just, now I'm familiar with West Indian men as far as their ability to cook and to work with their hands. So that was very familiar to me. Now that's where we stopped. We're going to continue with the temp agency. This is James talking. The temp agency got me a job as a maintenance worker at an apartment building for seniors in Newington. I took 3 buses and walked another half mile to get there. I've had lots of jobs. I worked at a warehouse. I packed barrels with dry goods, sardines, dry milk, rice, and flour that families shipped to their relatives in the West Indies and Africa. I filled in at the Mr. Sparkle car wash when their workers called out. The boss at the temp agency saw that I was good with my hands, that I could fix anything, and sent me on jobs no one else would do. Oh, okay. Now we're really going to start over because I read you that before. I learned about grace and the Friday gathering at the House of Bread, James said. I got to know a young woman who volunteered there. She handed out the forks and spoons wrapped in napkins. One Friday, I was riding my bike back from a job when I saw her walking. I stopped to say hello and asked her where she was going. She told me she was on her way to a church where they cook good food on Friday nights and send you home with bread and leftovers. If they have any. She was talking about grace. See, the Lord has been watching out for me my whole life. I go to church as often as possible, he continued. The Methodist Church on Sunday and King Chapel on Wednesday evening. God moves in mysterious ways. James recited Psalm 121 from memory and ended with, "The Lord will keep your going out and coming in from this time on and forevermore." I got my faith from my grandfather. He was a deacon in his church. Sometimes he took me to church and left me there by myself. I like going on Sundays. It was the one day of the week I could wear long pants and shoes. I liked getting dressed up pretty. In late December, 2 days after Christmas, James was riled up when he arrived at the Friday gathering. He put his things down at the table, and before he got his dinner, he confronted me. Not one of my daughters called on Christmas Day. Not one. Not one Christmas. Merry Christmas. He paced in a small circle and continued. How can they not remember their father? No card, no phone call, no Merry Christmas. Is this how they honor their father? The next week, James said, I made copies of my story, the one you wrote, and mailed it to my sister and each of my daughters. They don't understand my life, and this explains it. I want my grandchildren to know who their grandfather is. I told them that when I die, I want it read at my funeral. It's my eulogy. A few weeks later, James was stirred up again when he arrived for dinner. In a high-pitched voice, he said, She woke me up at 6 o'clock this morning. Who calls at that hour? Can you believe it? My daughter called me to wish me happy birthday. Yes, he added, Today is my birthday. My daughter remembered me. She called before I left for work. I asked him if he thought sharing his story had made a difference. Yes, maybe so, he said. Months later, James said his daughter was inspired to write his story and share it with him. Write her story and share it with him. One afternoon, when James arrived, Barb, a volunteer, and I noticed that Mr. Sparkle Car Wash logo on his shirt and cap. "Do you have a new job?" we asked him. James smiled and nodded. "I'm the boss. I've been filling in at different Mr. Sparkle car washes when their employees call out. They're all run by the same manager, and he noticed what kind of worker I am. He asked me if I wanted a supervisor position. He offered me permanent full-time job. I asked James if he liked being responsible for other employees. I'm a good supervisor. I told the guys, I'm not going to call your attention to what needs doing. Walk around and find it yourself. If you can't see what needs to be doing, if you need something to find it for you, then I don't need you. On a summer afternoon in 2021, James arrived early for dinner. He was with his daughter, the youngest, who lived in Jamaica. He was more talkative than usual. "This is my daughter," he said, extending his arm toward her. He took his time to introduce her to each of the volunteers. "She's here for a long weekend. I'm giving her a tour of Hartford." His daughter smiled and greeted us. She took out her cell phone and showed us pictures of her children. "My grandchildren love me," James said. "If my daughters start to pick on me, my grandchildren say to their mother, 'Leave my grandfather alone.' They defend me." A few weeks later, I asked James if he had heard from his daughter in North Carolina. "Since her mother died," he said, "we talk on the phone every day. I know she's hurting, but I'm grateful it has brought us closer." At the end of August, James arrived late on Friday afternoon. He rode his bike up the sidewalk to the door, where Leah, a volunteer, and I were waiting, and softly said, "My mother died 2 days ago." His shoulders slumped, and he stared at the ground. He knew it was coming. We talked by phone every day. I need to go to Jamaica. I need to say goodbye. I always tried to honor my mother, but James didn't make it to her funeral. There wasn't enough time to make international flight reservations while COVID-19 restrictions were still in place. It's unusual for James to miss a Friday gathering. He is often the last to arrive, and we don't close the doors until he comes. If a piece of equipment is broken at the car wash, I can't ignore it like that, James said. I don't leave work until it's repaired. Some weeks it makes me late, but I always come because the woman at the door says to me, "Oh, my friend, I packed a bag for you." I don't want to disappoint her. Leah, the woman at the door, knows James's preferences, his likes and dislikes. Before he arrives, she has already packed a bag for him. It's filled with avocados, bananas, fresh tomatoes, peppers, milk, and cheese when they're available, and an assortment of pantry supplies. Her attentiveness to detail. She remembers the diner's preferences, is how she shows them that they matter. Before he leaves, James checks a trash barrel at the back door. The barrel collects empty bottles and cans that can be redeemed for a nickel deposit. Members of Grace and others bring them to church for diners to collect. Lee, a member of Grace, told me about the bin and that I could help myself. It gives me something to do when I'm not at work, James said. And that's James's story. I want to go back to when Leah packs a bag for James. We know how that feels because, when we go into our favorite restaurant and we sit down and the waitress comes up to you and already knows what you want, brings the drink you always have, or when you go into a bakery and they just pack up your stuff and know what you want, that always feels good, doesn't it? Always feels good when people remember you. So these stories are remembrances. Some of you probably do know James. He was still riding his bike. I was wondering, he didn't get a car. he was still riding his bike and working hard. And I thought it was a heartwarming story, and it also kind of made me just think about struggles and people like James who keep on going no matter what, who don't just lay down and do nothing. And he was in a strange country and he just kept on going. He did what he could until he could do better. Some of us need to learn what James learned. Some of us need to be like James. Keep on stepping and keep on going. So that's our story for today. I don't have another story for you, but I'll have some more things for you, whatever I bring up in my mind. I wish that you were here so I could just ask you a question. Oh, I have a friend of mine here. I could ask her some questions. Oh, yeah. Deborah. Hi. I was looking all about you. Yes. Should I put up this mic stand? Or maybe we can share it. Well, how did you like the story? What did you think about this story?
I like the story because it gave me a window of hope that a lot of times what motivates people, what gets them going to
turn it on.
You
gotta turn it on.
I gotta turn it on.
Yeah, the switch. I can hear her though.
You can hear her all right?
Yeah.
All right, we can hear her. Okay.
They just continue to carry on. if they're doing something positive, something that they love to do, and it just gives them the impetus to move on, do the thing they want to do, because that's what brings their inner joy. And when you get your inner joy, you can do just about anything, even things that you don't even imagine that you can do is possible. So that story led me to those type of thoughts that you do the struggle. There's always a struggle. You resolve one struggle, but you move on to another struggle. But if you follow a plan of how you handle a struggle, you can use that blueprint to do another struggle. So it gives you that movement, that possibility, and it also helps you to look inside yourself and find what it is that makes you tick. So I really related to that story and how he made his way through situations, his daily situations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for your input. And I'd like to know what some of you think, so you can text or write. What do they do? Stan, to give an opinion. I'm sorry.
Email.
Oh.
Email us at well, they can write a message in the message section.
Oh yes. Write a message in the message section to tell us what you feel and what you think about this story. Now it is time for us to go. I would prolong this, but other people have things to do, but I'd love to stay longer and be with you. But hey, I gotta go. So remember, read a little, write a little, dream big, and I'll see you next week.